With Season 3 of Invincible finally coming to an end, there's only one thing I can say about this season. This is absolutely peak superhero content. Mark has been through hell and back this season and has undergone a permanent shift in his morality. One that will bring huge consequences down the line for sure. Coming off of a very dark and depressing end to Season 2 with the fight between Mark and Angstrom Levy resulting in what was assumed to be the death of Angstrom, Season 3 really does ramp up the stakes for Mark, who was truly stuck in a moral quandary of how he should process his guilt of the people around him dying during his fights, his impact as a hero, as well as what is right and wrong, and his responsibility as the strongest superhero on Earth. More than anything, it feels like this season was one where Mark was thrown question after question of what he perceives to be the ethical line of what superheroes can and can't do. Big spoilers for Season 1, 2, and 3 of Invincible. Check it out if you haven't. Also, please don't spoil the comics in the comments. I know how Invincible fans are, you guys calm down. With that being said, like and subscribe and let's get into the video. This season starts with some much needed downtime and a strength boost for Mark. But the relative peace shatters when Doc Seismic captures nearly every superhero, Mark included. Darkwing and D.A. Sinclair's Reaniman swoop in to help, freeing everyone but leaving Mark absolutely furious when he realizes that not only has Sinclair been granted a second chance by Cecil, but Cecil has also placed a transmitter in Mark's head that emits a debilitating frequency. For Mark, whose worldview is still largely black and white, this revelation is an unforgivable breach of trust. He can't believe that the good guys would stoop to such invasive measures, even as Cecil insists is just a necessary failsafe against a half-Viltrumite, who might one day become Earth's biggest threat. This confrontation highlights the season's most riveting tension. Cecil's hard-nosed pragmatism versus Mark's moral idealism. While Cecil's mindset reflects the harsh realities of a world teetering on cosmic peril, Mark sees it as an ethically murky stance that betrays everything he believes heroes should stand for. In many ways, this echoes Mark's deeper fear of following in Omni-Man's ruthless footsteps. Once again, an authority figure he's supposed to trust is willing to cross lines that Mark deems inexcusable. The rift between them widens with every new secret Cecil keeps and every morally grey ally he recruits. But with this move, and another one down the line of the season, I'm starting to doubt the writing surrounding his character, because telling an already pissed off Viltrumite that you're intending to control him like a dog with the transmitter that you implanted in his head without telling him is not a good decision in any sense. What was he thinking? There's so many better ways that he could have approached this. First of all, he could have been very open with Mark, his strongest superhero, on what he was planning to do with Darkwing and D.A. Sinclair. He could have also approached the transmitter in a different way, pitched it as Viltrumite defenses, etc. Maybe a great idea, don't put it in his head. Or, if you do put it in his head, don't tell him. Cecil is a character that usually makes the right decisions, even though they could be very morally grey. As he himself said, we could be the good guys or the guys who win. This ideology is what is needed in a world like Invincible's, and it clashes heavily with Mark's more simplistic point of view. Another character I wanted to discuss was Debbie. She doesn't get a ton of screen time this season, but there's some really interesting progress that she makes. Surprisingly, she does end up dating again and starts going out with Paul, and there's some super interesting ground in terms of how she manages to have a personal life with Paul while being a mother of two of the strongest beings on this planet, and how she then ends up sharing this fact with Paul. I still personally think Paul is a bit shady, and I just feel like he's up to something, even though he's done nothing wrong so far. I just think he'll end up either snitching or doing something with the villain that could hurt Debbie. A lot of what makes Debbie's arc really good this season is parenting Oliver and grappling with his willingness to jump into battle with Mark to help, and learning to give that freedom since she can't really control him. It's a very tidy season for her, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how Nolan would react to seeing Paul for the first time when he returns to Earth. Speaking of Oliver, what a season this kid has had. He really is growing up fast, huh? Going to season 3, I honestly didn't expect too much from him, but he's become one of the highlights of the season for me. In many ways, Oliver's arc is the most overt exploration of the show's biggest ethical question. Should villains be killed, or is there a line heroes must never cross? From the moment Oliver casually executes the Mauler twins, a move that felt extremely abrupt and cold, we see how differently he views crime and punishment compared to Mark. Part of this stems from Oliver's Viltrumite heritage. He doesn't have the same earthly upbringing or the same emotional attachments that Mark does. He's new to everything, new to the planet, new to humanity's moral compass, and is still forming his own sense of what's right and wrong. What makes Oliver so interesting is how his black and white logic clashes with Mark's more nuanced approach. Where Mark struggles with the lingering guilt of having killed Angstrom Levy, Oliver believes that the simplest solution is often the best. Remove the threat permanently. His rationale isn't fueled by sadism or cruelty, but by a naive yet chilling practicality. If someone's in danger, why let them live to hurt others again? This puts a spotlight on the show's central dilemma. Does sparing villains repeatedly cause more harm in the long run? Or is lethal force a slippery slope that dehumanizes heroes and warps their original ideals? Oliver's moral stance is further shaped by the emotional rollercoaster of discovering family ties with Omni-Man and Mark, both of whom have radically different views on responsibility and compassion. Caught between Mark's human empathy and the Viltrumite instinct for efficiency, Oliver is at a critical crossroad. Watching him wrestle with these ideas, sometimes siding firmly with Mark, other times shocking everyone with his ruthlessness, has been one of the most compelling threads of the season. It forces Mark, and by extension the audience, to question whether lines can or should be drawn in a world where one miscalculation can cost countless lives. What's more interesting is that at the end of the season, Mark comes to the conclusion that Oliver is right, and I'm really excited to see the backlash that Mark faces from a decision like this. Alright, enough about Oliver. Let's talk about one of my favorite characters this season, Powerplex. Before I get into it, let me just remind you guys, I'm really trying to hit 1,000 subs this year. So if you guys could like and subscribe real quick, that would be amazing. But yeah, on with the video. So, Powerplex. His introduction offers a heartbreaking yet captivating study in grief, and seeing Aaron Paul voice yet another character driven by sorrow immediately reminded me of Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad. Powerplex is absolutely blinded by grief, and that's what makes him stand apart from most of the villains in Invincible. His loss isn't some cosmic level tragedy orchestrated by the Viltrumites. Instead, he's a civilian who's had his world torn apart by the collateral damage of superhero battles, specifically from Mark and his father. From his perspective, Mark Grayson is the monster that shattered his life. Powerplex channels his anguish into raw, destructive energy, literally weaponizing his pain. It's a sobering reminder of how easily good intentions can lead to devastation for ordinary people caught up in the crossfire. Narratively, Powerplex's arc does two things really well. It forces Mark to confront the human cost of his battles. Mark's struggle with bigger villains like Angstrom Levy or Conquest often overshadow the everyday individuals who suffer along the way. Powerplex puts a face to that collateral damage, forcing Mark, and by extension the audience, to ask if enough is being done to protect innocent bystanders. It also adds emotional depth to the hero versus villain dynamic. Powerplex isn't out to conquer the world. He's driven by heartbreak. Much like Breaking Bad's Jesse Pinkman, he's a man who feels backed into a corner by circumstances beyond his control. That rage may twist him into a villain in Mark's story, but you can't help but sympathize with the wounded human underneath the power blast. Ultimately, Powerplex serves as a dark reflection of what can happen when trauma and anger go unaddressed in the Invincible universe. Mark might just be the invincible hero, but to someone like Powerplex, he's just as responsible for that pain as any other supervillain. And just when Mark thinks he's starting to grasp the true weight of his responsibilities, the world is blindsided by not just one, but 18 Viltrumites arriving with one mission to destroy the planet. Worst part is, the person who's behind this is the person that Mark thought he murdered with his own hands. For Mark, it's almost poetically torturous to have Angstrom Levy come back to hunt him like this. Suddenly, defending a single city or even a single planet feels unimaginably small compared to the waves of destruction that sweeps across the globe in rapid succession. For Mark, the Invincible War is more than just the biggest fight of his life. It's a grim reminder that no matter how strong he becomes or how many lessons he's learned, the universe has a way of escalating threats beyond anyone's control. Entire nations crumble, heroes are stretched to their limits, and Mark finds himself questioning whether the moral lines that he's been drawing, lines he was already struggling to uphold, can remain intact in the face of such boundless devastation. In the end, as the war's brutal toll mounts, Mark is forced to ask himself if his brand of heroism still stands a chance in a battle that seems destined to break him. After Eve is injured by one of the Invincibles he was fighting, Mark finds himself paralyzed in hospital, able to do nothing but sit by Eve's side, terrified that something would happen to her if he left. He just sits there, for 2 days, doing nothing. In that agonizing stillness, the weight of his failures and the enormity of the war that he's been fighting comes crashing down, leaving Mark to wonder if he has any fight left in him, or if he's already lost the war within himself. One more thing I wanted to highlight was Rex's death. It was truly heartwarming seeing Rex's character arc this season as he grew and matured so much to truly become a good person. A complete far cry from the person he was in season 1. It really hit deep, especially after his budding relationship with Ray and their growth together, to the point where he had an option to hang up the boots, to retire and enjoy life. But yet, he chose to fight. Rex was a hero. By the way, before I finish this section, can I just mention how I absolutely despise the fact that Robot took Rex's name. You stole his body, and now you steal his name. How pathetic is that? I can't believe none of the characters said anything about how extremely weird this was from Rudy. It just felt unsettling and disrespectful. I hope there's repercussions to this decision from Robot, because I just absolutely cannot fathom how weird this is from him. There's so much more I can say about the Invincible War, but I'm gonna leave it at that. With the Earth reeling, there's no time for breaks. In very typical Invincible fashion, the situation can always be worse. Conquest enters the fray. An elite Viltrumite who isn't even interested in the Viltrum Empire. He's just after the thrill of battle. From the moment he appears, Conquest exudes a menacing confidence that shakes Mark to his core. This isn't just another villain or a misguided antagonist. Even his mere presence gives us the best animation in the show. This episode was absolutely incredible. You can clearly tell that the last 2 episodes of the season were what was focused on animation-wise, and it truly does pay off. When Mark finally squares off with Conquest, every moral line Mark has painstakingly tried to preserve is called into question. The resulting showdown is not merely a clash of raw power, but a brutal interrogation of Mark's values, pushing him to unleash a ferocity he spent his whole life trying to repress. With Conquest absolutely brutalizing Oliver and nearly ripping him in half, Mark had no room to hold back in this fight, and yet he barely kept up with Conquest. Eve showed out big time in this fight as well, really helping Mark in crucial moments against Conquest. It really felt like it was a team effort between the two of them to take this monster down, and the scale of destruction in this fight is absolutely no joke. Mark literally gets Omni-Manned yet again, being dragged through hundreds of people as they shred around him. This fight is absolutely incredible, and I love how they added the moment where Conquest really does become vulnerable towards Mark, talking about how he was never given a name and how lonely he is this whole time. Conquest is the literal embodiment of destruction in Invincible, and we end this fight in the same poetic way, with Mark just breaking all his limbs and smashing his head into Conquest until his head is crushed onto the floor. There's so much more I can talk about with this fight, and there's a lot of symbolism within Conquest himself, but I think that's better off left for another video. There's so many massive takeaways this season. The fact that there are multiple Invincible Reanimen, the fact that Conquest is still alive by Cecil, the implications of Eve's power being unlocked, Angstrom's next moves, and what Mark will do now that he's decided to kill if needed. In a way, Season 2 and Season 3 have ended in very similar but different ways, with Mark gruesomely killing an enemy to protect his loved ones. The only difference was, in Season 2, Mark didn't want to kill Angstrom, but in Season 3, Mark wanted to end Conquest's life. If I was to sum up the season, it would be the fact that Mark has been forced to abandon his ideals to carry the burden of being Earth's strongest superhero. The only question is, will he become like his father? Or will he stay a humane hero whose ideals are truly noble? I highly doubt it because this is Invincible, and Invincible exists in a gray area. But regardless, thank you guys so much for watching this video. This has been a way longer script than I really wanted to be. Obviously, I have so much to talk about Invincible. I love this show. I think this was probably one of the best shows this year. But yeah, with that being said, like and subscribe. I really do want to get to 1,000 subs this year. And I'll see you guys in a bit. Take care and peace.